No eres adecuado para hacer esto, capitán.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We will begin with our prayer to be followed by the national anthem. May we request everyone to put yourselves in the presence of our Lord.
God Almighty, thank you for bringing us together to celebrate Cebuano culture and heritage through the sharing of our stories. We need this in this time of uncertainty, O God, to remind us of our identity as a people, unique, blessed, and proud. This reminder must inspire us that whatever challenges we face, whether unseen, alien, and treacherous, can always be overcome when we are united in working for the present and the future and the heritage of our children and community. We pray for our present-day heroes who are fighting against the virus and other threats that besiege us today, our own people struggling to overcome these threats, and those who have died, fallen but never forgotten. Dearest God, heal our land. Amen.
Bayang magiliw, paras ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sarili mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuyanda ng matipig, sa manlulupig, ikapasisingin, sa sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit o baba. Mailag ang tula, tawid sa bagay minamahal. Ang isang ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningig. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may mag-ibilig. Lupa ng araw na luwalhati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may maghahabi, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Ayong hapon mga Cebuanon, welcome to Sa Kabilin 2020 online activities. This is an engaging space to appreciate and experience Cebu's culture and heritage. To start our learning session this afternoon, we would like to introduce the Dean of the College of Communication, Art, and Design of the University of the Philippines, Cebu. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in Fine Arts, major in painting, from the University of the Philippines, Cebu. She also obtained her master's degree in Creative Industries, major in Creative Production and Arts Management at the Queensland University of Technology in Australia. She is a visual artist who has mounted solo exhibits and joined local and international group shows. She was a regional winner of the Philippine Art Awards in 2007 and was awarded an Artist in Residence program in Paris in 2013. She also served as an executive member and the National Vice Chair of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts Committee on Visual Arts from 2004 to 2015. Let us all welcome Dean Palmi Petudtun.
Maayo ug malipayong hapon kanatong tanan. Mga higala sa Rafi, gabi sa Kabilin Partners, ug sa tanang kauban nato karong higayuna. This very commendable online initiative of Rafi and the Gabi sa Kabilin team began last June, and its primary objective is for us to continue to rediscover and cherish the history of the Queen City and its well-kept treasures, even in this time of uncertainty. The University of the Philippines Cebu is honored to be a partner of Rafi's Gabi sa Kabilin. Our partnership began years back in 2014, UP Cebu's first participation to Gabi sa Kabilin. We were very excited then to open the campus until around midnight to share to the visitors the history of UP Cebu. We are very excited now to once again take part in this Gabi sa Kabilin initiative. As I welcome everyone to this afternoon's talk, let me take you back briefly on the history of UP Cebu, the school that refused to die, according to author and retired UP Cebu history professor, Dr. Madrilena de la Serna. UP Cebu began as a junior college of liberal arts in Cebu City, which was established on May 3, 1918, with classes at Warwick Barracks in front of Leon Quilat Street in Ermita District, near where Carbon Market is now. It faced many challenges, such as the lack of a permanent home, the effects of global economic crisis, and opposition in Manila against its further expansion and continued existence. But the will of the Cebuano people and the UP Cebu community prevailed, and the Junior College of Liberal Arts in Cebu City was granted a 13-hectare site in Lahug. In 1927, Professor Teofilo Reyes of the UP College of Engineering finalized plans for the Lahug campus and oversaw the completion of a two-story building, which was inaugurated by UP President Rafael Palma in 1929. In 1945, classes were held at the buildings the Americans had built. The main building and athletic field, which were damaged during the war, were repaired through funds from the War Damage Commission. UP Cebu has gone through war and upheavals, political and administrative opposition, uncertainty, and tension, and has risen above it all. It has mastered the art of rebirth and reinvention, changing its name 11 times, from the Junior College of Liberal Arts in 1918 to Cebu College in UP in 1947, to the UP Graduate School in Cebu in 1963, to the UP Visayas Cebu College in 1987, to the UP Cebu College in 2010, and finally to UP Cebu. As a UP constituent unit born in the Queen City of the South, the campus' iconic landmark is the administration building, in front of which the oblation stands. The administration building was declared a historical landmark on December 2, 2010 by the National Historical Commission. And last May 3, 2018, UP Cebu celebrated 100 years. As we move forward to another century, UP Cebu will continue to be a partner in keeping culture and heritage of Cebu alive. This afternoon, Rafi, Gabi sa Kabilin, and UP Cebu will share with you Bulawanong Tahom, the aesthetic life of pre-colonial Cebuanos, to be presented by a colleague from the University of the Philippines, Cebu College of Communication, Art and Design, who currently teaches art history and theory and product design courses. He is the curator of the Jose T. Hoya Gallery and the coordinator of the Office for Initiatives in Culture and the Arts of UP Cebu. He finished his undergraduate degree in Fine Arts from the University of San Carlos in Cebu City and completed his MA Art Studies on Art Theory and Criticism from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. In Cebu's contemporary art scene, he has been actively engaged in the art practice of curatorship and artistic direction in collaboration with local art galleries and institutions. Furthermore, he has shown substantial work in the area of art scholarship. His researches cover Cebuano art and design history, theory, and criticism, which are relatively young scholarly fields. He specializes in Spanish colonial art, American pre-war art in Cebu, Cebuano design history, and is a foremost expert on church ceiling painting in the Visayas. He is the art historian of Project Kisame, which studies the ceiling frescoes of churches in the Philippines. Mga higala, mga namino karong hapuna, I am very proud to welcome you to a conversation with Assistant Professor J. Nathan Jore. Daghang salamat. Hi Jay, maayong hapon kanimo.
Ayun hapon, ma'am. Maayo kaayo pagka-basa. Uy, mura magyutag na sa radyo, naminaw.
Oy Jay, yes,
Yes, ma'am.
let me tell you this. I just want to say that you need to know this. I'm really and truly happy nga ang Rafi and ang Gabi sa Kabilin ni-invite gud kanimo to do this talk. You have so much to share and your expertise on the topic will make our listeners, especially atong mga kaigsuunang Cebuano, nga proud gud sila diha kanimo. So Jay, thank you kaayo ug padayon.
Salamat, Ma'am Pams. Niya, kita-kita sa UP. Ugma,
That's
unya.
right. Yes.
Sige.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Natong tanan.
Thank you, ma'am. So, maayong hapon kanatong tanan, everyone, naminaw, na naa sa ilang mga panimalay, silang opisina, sa atong mga kauban sa cultural work, mga faculty, mga teachers, ug mga estudyante, maayong hapon kanatong tanan. Allow me to share this afternoon a research topic that I have completed as part of my master's program doing local art history while I was studying the ceiling paintings of churches in Cebu and Bohol. So this was a portion to establish the connection of how, why Cebuano artist Remigio Francia was able to create the wonderful ceiling paintings in Cebu and Bohol, and it created the pre-colonial art and aesthetic, created that backdrop for local artists to flourish up until now in the contemporary art scene. So, ang atuang topic karong hapuna, Bulawanong Tahom, it's the aesthetic life of pre-colonial Cebuanos. Later on, atong itis out ang atong title at the end. Ang kinisiyang maong topic deals with, when we say aesthetics, it deals with the notions of beauty. Unsa man ang para sa mga pre-colonial Filipinos, Cebuanos, unsa man ang kagwapa, ang kanindot, ang katahom. notions of beauty, creative expressions, and practices. Giunsa man nila pagpadayag? How do they express these concepts of beautiful, the concepts of beautiful, sublime, and how these articulations, these creative expressions and practices are perceived, experienced by pre-colonial Filipinos in their day-to-day life. How integral is this creativity to the life of pre-colonial Cebuanos, Bisaya Filipinos? Next slide, please. Next slide. So to do this, we all know that Cebu was colonized, and a lot of our pre-colonial heritage has been forgotten. So we rely on the written text found in archives and from archaeological findings. Some oral narratives has been a new method, source of knowledge and data about our pre-colonial ancestors. So we have Pigfetta, of course, his journal about the circumnavigation of the world, and then we have the Boxer Codex, published around the late 1500s, 1590s, and then we have Francisco Alsina, Jesuit, who did a history of the Cebuano, who wrote the history of the Visayan people, published in 1600s. And then we have William Henry Scott's Barangay and the Blair and Robertson collection of archival Spanish-Hispanic documents. So from this set of archival materials and text, we are able to take a glimpse and picture out how our ancestors in Cebu, in the Visayas, lived and thrived. Next slide. So when Magellan arrived in the Philippines in 1521, the celebrated Sistine Chapel paintings of Michelangelo was barely 9 years old, finished only in 1512. In the history of Western art, it was the flourishing of what art historians refer to as the High Renaissance, where artists Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Raphael, evoked as geniuses, became leading figures of European art. So under this context, the Ingikan sila Magellan, it's High Renaissance, and we are looking at magnificent art and architecture. And then that conditioned their initial encounter with our ancestors. So next slide. Our topic this afternoon presents challenges and opportunities, and I'd like to zero in on the importance of this particular topic to the scholarly work on local art history. I've been teaching art history to our students in the Fine Arts program, and it's really challenging to introduce students to our own artistic production because art history books are very Western. So we are not surprised that we are more well-versed about the works of Michelangelo, the Renaissance, Da Vinci, but it's really, really hard to know or identify works by local painters, local sculptors. So there is this need more scholarly research on our own local art history. So this topic, our pre-colonial aesthetics, is very crucial to this undertaking. And then also on our understanding of art theory. What is art? What is Cebuano art? Most of the time, this understanding of what art is very much conditioned by Western judgment of taste, Western aesthetics. And so, when we say art, we always think about painting, sculpture, architecture. It always it has this representational, formalist, and expressivist elements, and focuses as much on the creative activity of the artistic genius. So naagi usa ka artist nga sikat, nga muna iyang trabaho, which is quite a challenge if we put in the pre-colonial artistic production, pre-colonial aesthetics, concept of beauty into this template of Western art. Because we know for a fact that our pre-colonial ancestors, there were no famous painters, there were no famous sculptors. So it's quite a challenge to relate pre-colonial aesthetics to Western understanding of art. So it is a good opportunity for us before, in preparation for the 500 years of the arrival of Magellan, and the 500 years of the victory in Mactan, the 500 years of the arrival of the Santo Niño. It's important to know these relationships between pre-colonial aesthetics, pre-colonial art, and what the colonizers brought in as the concept of art. So next slide. Okay, and next slide. So we begin. Naabot sila Magellan. Nisud ang support of Cebu, ang ilahang galleons, ang ilahang galleon ba tawag ana? Ilang barko. And what immediately Pigfetta and his men noticed was the absence of pre-colonial architectural structures. So matod pa ni Pigfetta, when they entered the port of Cebu, passing by many villages where we saw many houses built upon logs. So Mandawi area siguro ni Liluan, Mandawi area nga nisud sila sa Mactan Channel, nakita nila nga daghang mga balay nga naa nagbatog og mga logs, ang ilahang poste haligi tag-as. Their houses are constructed of wood and are built of planks and bamboo, raised high from the ground on large logs, and one must enter by means of ladders. And the Boxer Codex, the writer of the Boxer Codex would say that the buildings and houses, as well as the arrangement of the villages, are very, very poor, and they're constructed without design, without order or harmony. Next slide. So as early colonizers have noted, the impermanence of structures and lack the presence of grand architectural structures that would necessitate an artistic decorative program comparable to those found in Europe. So walay mga balay nga naay mga paintings, naay mga ceiling decorations, mga hanging landscapes, mga sculptures, portraits. Ang ilang nakita mga balay nga sama niini. These are drawings in the book of Alcina depicting the houses of pre-colonial Cebuanos, Bisaya. Next. So architect Gerald Lico contends that the impermanence of pre-colonial architecture is a manifestation of the pre-colonial people's conception of space, how they look at space, interact with space, wherein the natural environment permeates through the private domestic space. The continuity of the Bahay Kubo as integrated to the wider natural surroundings make it a mere component of a vast, limitless living space. So ang balay integrated fully to the environment. Ang naara nila higdaanan nga tuwa sa taas, musaka ug stairs. Sa ubos, open, where they gather, where they interact with one another, where they do their day-to-day activity. Integrated. Next, please. So, unlike in Europe, nga igtan-aw gyud nimo mga palasyo, igsudi mo sa palasyo, naadayoy mga sculptures, naadayoy mga paintings, naaday mga decorations nya wala man na sa pre-colonial times sa atong lugar. So the absence of grand buildings does not in any way hinder the pre-colonial Filipino to showcase their creative abilities. In fact, early colonizers had noted the natives' love for elaborate rituals and grand festivities, which necessitates their creative energies. Decorative painting and decoration in general in the pre-colonial times were not architectural in nature. Rather, it is centered on one important entity, and that is the human body, revealing a humanist artistic ideology. What the pre-colonial Filipino lacks in architectural painting and decoration, in the presence of palaces and grand architectural and engineering works, they magnanimously expressed through the decoration of the body as the immediate dwelling place of one's own being. Next slide. In fact, national artist and Cebuano, Russell Mujares contends that in the pre-colonial times, architectural structures was not the datus prized possession. In the event of raids and tribal wars, communities tend to retreat and abandon their settlements, sometimes burning them to evade incoming raiders or enemies. What was rather important for the datu was the number of people under him, the number of able warm bodies that can fight and protect the community. Next slide. So, as a prized possession, the human body is well celebrated and decorated. Decorative expressions were geared towards the endowment of the human body with implements and ornamentation that mark the bearers with distinction in society and command certain role in community affairs. So, unsa gisulob, unsa gi-decorate sa lawas, mupakita ug unsa ang imong structure in the community. Next slide. Anthropologists have gathered pieces of anthropomorphic funerary pottery, tattoo, dental ornamentation, cranial deformation, clothing, jewelry, weaponry that very much attest to this humanist artistic ideology and are part of the display of power and social class. So naatanan diri ang creative abilities of our ancestors ni gawas. Next slide. So we now think of conventions of beauty. Kung naaday sa lawas ang tanan, ang pag-express artistically, unsa man ang mga conventions of beauty? How do our pre-colonial ancestors look at what is beautiful, what is sublime? So naay makita nga duha ka elemento nga ni frame sa concept, notion of beauty. And that is cosmetic refinement and bodily ornamentation. So the Visayans, our ancestors, look at the body. Ang yang sense of self is very strong that he can actually intervene to the formation of the body. Cosmetic refinement, iyang i-refine, iyahang i-intervene ang natural bodily conditions. And then, kining next slides, mga overview na lang ni siya sa unsay mga cosmetic refinement nga gibuhat sa atong ancestors ug unsa mga ornamentation nga ilang gisulob sa lawas. Very complex ni siya, daghan og mga kaning practices and belief system nga also guided the artistic production, but these are overviews of these bodily intervention. So una, next slide, decorative dentistry. So kaning ato ang uso kay karon nga mga kaning braces, magpa-retainers, kay maayo ho na itong ngipon, naana na siya kaniadto sa ato ang mga ancestors. The most impressive example of Visayan dentistry were its gold work. Gold-pegged incisors were noted by Pigfetta in Limasawa and by Ordaneta in Lianga Bay, and a plenty of beautiful specimens have been recovered from archaeological digs. Pusad, ang tawag, pusad, was a general term for teeth gold work, whether they were inlays, crown, or plating. The manunusad was a dental worker, ang dentist, and a professional who got paid for his services. So ang buhaton na nila, straighten, bairan ang ngipon para mo align siya, and then they put in gold inlays, usay mo rag scales, usahay mo rag ipeg yun. So it adds to the shine of their smiles, the golden elements in the teeth. And then, of course, we have tattooing. Next slide, please. So kibaw na gitaan ni pintados tungod kay na ay tattoos ang mga Visayans, mga Bisaya. Batok was a general term for tattoos, and it also meant the marking of snakes or lizards or any design printed or stamped on. These tattoos were symbols of valor, male valor. They were applied only after a man had performed in battle with fitting courage. And like modern military decorations, they accumulated with additional feats. So magadaghan ang imong giadtuan nga battles, magadaghan ang imuhang tattoo. Next slide. Next slide. And anyone who applied, applied on one who did not kill or captured an enemy were scorned as counterfeit. So mura og yaga-yagaan, di gid pwede nga magtatu-tatu ka din ha, nga wa gyud kay na-accomplished. So moreover, a tattooed man who was considered cowardly was compared to a lizard. Halo. A large black and yellow reptile, tattooed all over, but extremely timid, extremely shy, hinay. So inanak ko no ang mga tao nga naitatuon ta pero talawan. Next slide. The first tattoos a person received were applied to the legs. So naani siya sequence. Legs, beginning at the ankles and ending at the waist. So muna'y una, kung masugod na ka og fight. Chest tattoos, which look like breastplates, less frequently, tattoos on the abdomen, naapod sa tiyan, only came after further action in battle. And still later, those at the whole back, it's the widest field for the tattooer's artistry. Sayang design niyang i-compose sa likod. And then, the facial tattoos from ear to chin to eye were restricted to the boldest and toughest warriors. So makita gyud nimo nga ang tattoo na mo signify siya how your place in society. Kung daghan kag tattoo, respectable ka, gamay ra kag tattoo, you need to prove yourself. So kana. So naay sa ngipon, naay sa panit, and then the next one, next slide, skull molding. Kabantay mo aning sa drawing. Mura og napiit ang naa siya certain shape. Besides, skull molding was done with a device called tangad, a comb-like set of thin rods bound to a baby's forehead by bandages fastened at some point behind. So ihigot anak. This prevented the forward growth of the frontal bone and directed it backwards so that the head grew higher at the rear. Dili mo pasaka sa padong sa likod. Adults with a desired tangad profile were called tinangad, but flatness of the back of the head was called puyak. So the opposite of the tangad was undo. Kung tinangad, imong tinangad, ang walay ingon ni ana nga head, they're called undo. As Father Sanchez commented, just as there are puraw and binatakan, the tattooed, and ang walay tattoo si puraw, wala na siya tattoo, si binatakan na siya tattoo. Kana siya nga duha ka dichotomy, ang naay tattoo, way tattoo, pirihas pud ni siya sa skull molding. Ang naay gimold ang yang the tinangad, and the undo. And the word undo is itself a comment on the Visayan attitude towards unmolded skulls. It means tight packed or overstuffed like a hunchback's hump. So di sila ganahan kay mura kuno og buktot pero nasa imong mura dako kay imong ang agtang. So they want to refine it and push your head backwards. Later on na ni siya rason igabot sa hair. Nganong ganahan kay sila ana nga profile sa head. Next slide. So both, next slide palihog. Okay. So pierced ears, narita sa dunggan. Sa may naa sa dunggan. Both men and women wore earrings. They had their ears pierced. Men with 1 or 2 holes per lobe, while women with 3 or 4 to accommodate a variety of ornaments. So babay, daghan kaayo. Ang sa lalaki, 1 or 2. Next slide. Earrings with or without pendants were held by thin gold pins run through the ear and fastened behind. But earplugs required holes as wide as 2 fingers or lobes distended into loops through which a person could stick his fist, masud ang kumo, sa kadako, sa lungag. The holes were made in the cartilage, one above the other. The women wore jewelry in all of them. So kanang mga makita nato sa mga batanon, mga estudyante nga punks nga dagko kaayo og mga buslot, kana gi-practice na sa mga kalakinaan during the pre-colonial times. Next slide. The most common style for men, however, were single rings worn in the bottom holes. These rings were thick as a finger, some hollow, and others of solid gold, heavy enough to pull the ear lobe down until the ring actually touches the shoulder. Ina siya kadagko. So murag ka ng mga painting, mga picture ni Lapu-Lapu, murag nagsulob og kuan, nagsulob og arios, di na siya gikawit, naagyud day na siya sa sud yun sa cartilage. And that sometimes it touches the shoulder. Ang yang kadako. The swinging motion of these huge gold rings, like that of the glittering spangles dangling from the ladies' earrings, was part of their attractiveness. So iglakaw ni mo, uyog-uyog siya, maigo siya sa adlaw, mo shine siya, mo kuan siya. So gwapa kuno kaayo tan-awon. Adds to their attractiveness. It's attractive to look at the face of that person na naay ang jewelry mo shine or mo reflect ang light. Then we go to the hair. Next slide. These Visayans wore their hair very long, both the men and the women. And they take great pride in it, combing it very often with fragrant oils they make for this purpose. Mga hiso. Muna tayo pagkabata atong lola, like hisuan o oil from the coconut para lugway. Kanang mo, sana, next slide term, ana. Mo drop jud Vaseline, kanang virgin coconut oil, mo drop jud ang buhok straight to the ground. Often, the women would permit it to grow so long that it would sometimes touch the ground. It was so thick that they would bunch it up. Next slide. Many of them have a curl which they wear in ringlets about the forehead without iron or instruments or metal pins. So naay kulot, naay murag bangs nga kulot sa atubangan. They tie up the hair with some gracefulness at the back of their head, rather high on the crown, and in a rose-like fashion, almost as large as the head itself. So mo make sense to na ang ilahang katong pag-bound nila sa head to the back, and then sawon siya diri og press pud kadako sa nga kuan bunch of hair looks like a rose. Next slide. They take great delight in making it bigger and bigger, so much so that rare is the woman who does not keep adding a large mass of false hair into her own as to create a spiral-like effect or rosettes. So uso na din na kani adto ang mga hair extensions para lang gyud maka-create sila ng bugdo kaayo, dako kayo nga murag imelda siguro nga inana nga hair, and they follow a certain shape, mga rosettes. Next slide. And also to this said rosette of hair, they added flowers and fragrant herbs, which they called tagon baysat, something that adds to beauty. Mupagwapa pa. They wear crowns and wreaths on their heads made of tinsel imported from China. Lacking these, they wear, kung wala kay kanang imported, di ka afford o imported from China, they wear wreaths of flowers and roses picked from the fields. So magbutang sila flowers sa ilang head, ang mga kababayan, the women. For a man to touch such a hairdo was a terrible offense. Bawal yun, di igad pwede nga mo hikap. But they were a handy target for other women, some polong, meant to grab somebody's hair by the locks. So murag kaning bugno siguro ni sa kababayan sa unap. Ang laki di pwede mo hikap sa buhok, pero ang babae pwede niya siya manglabnot. Sampolong. Next slide. Both men and women had their eyebrows shaved into thin arcs likened to a crescent moon. So ang kilay 2000, kaning pagtangtang, pag-refine, pagpanindot sa kilay, practice na po niya sa ato ang mga great-grand lolas in the pre-colonial times. And for the men, they gather their hair with elegant sashes called the Podong that they wrap around their head, which we will discuss later. So sa mga laki, ilang i-gather ang ilang buhok na ay murag pandong, purong, they call the Podong. And we move to the clothing. So gipang sulob, unsa may gisulob sa atong mga ancestors. So the basic garments were the G-string and tube skirt, bahag og murag malong. or kung dili malong, a light blanket wrapped around instead. But more prestigious clothes, gitawag ni siya collectively as lihin-lihin, were added for public appearances and especially in formal occasions. So na ay blouses, tunics, loose smocks with sleeves, capes, or ankle-length robes. High-quality clothes had decorative strips added to the edges and ends. So makita na to sa picture sa Boxer Codex, ang ilang mga sinina na ay mga decorative strips sa kilid, mura og end sa imuhang sleeve, end sa imong blouse. And sulubo ni siya ang lihin-lihin in special occasions. But normally, ang babae, wala ray gisulob sa mabaw, pero naa siya malong nga gisulob sa ubos. Next slide. The G-string or bahag was a piece of cloth 4 or 5 meters long. Taas kayo, 4 or 5 meters long. And something less than a meter wide. Ang iyahang kalap doon. G-strings were of the natural color of the cloth. However, in the case of men who had personally killed an enemy, they were qualified to wear deep red ones. These are drawings by Shari Villaver, our student in the Fine Arts program, interpreting the text of Alcina. So makita nimo ang nakalahi sa bahag sa Cebuanos or sa Bisaya, sa Cordillera for example, di ba? Sa Cordillera makita nimo ang ilahang mura o part sa ilahang lubot or sa ilang buttocks. Pero ang sa Cebuano, sa Bisaya, 4 or 5 meters taas kay siya nga piece of cloth. 1 meter ang iyahang kalap doon. So naa sila'y i-explain na in one of the parts of Alcina. Yang explain kung saan pagsulob asa ilusot ang one end of the cloth hangtod mo create siya murag kiln kaning mura siya o kanang shorts nga dili siya di makita ang imuhang mga private parts. And these are made of different textiles, different colors. The red ones are for those who have killed an enemy, mga magani or mga warriors. Next slide. The most prestigious kind of Podong headpiece, limited to the most valiant, was, like their G-strings, made of a special textile called the pinayusan. It's a gaze-thin abaka of fibers. Abaka, made of abaka, selected from their whiteness. You select from their whiteness and from their refinement. I-dye dayon into deep scarlet in patterns as fine as embroidery and burnished into a silky sheen. Such podong or headpiece were lengthened with each additional feat of valor. Real heroes, therefore, let one end hang loose with affected carelessness. Next slide, please. So makita nimo nga na-special nga headpiece podong made of pinayusan abaka textile. Nga ang katurag yung mga brave, katurag yung mga ngilngig kay nga mga wars ang makasulob ana. And what is interesting is that magkataas ang iyang tassel, ang iyang end sa as you accumulate additional feats of valor. Sama sa tattoo nga magadaghan. So magkataas po na siya. Nagsakay nimo sa kabayo, ngadto nimo sa kuan, nindot siya tan-awon nga mapalid sa hangin na muna nakalahi sa uban nga mga podong. Women generally wore a handkerchief called tubatum. If it was pulled tight over the head, the whole head. But they also had a broad brimmed hat called sayap or tarindak, woven of palm leaves. Some were evidently signs of rank. So when Humabon's queen, si Juana, Queen of Cebu, went to hear mass during Magellan's visit, she was preceded by 3 girls carrying each one of them a hat or kaning murag corona nga sago leaf. So naay tulo ka babae nga naguna niya. So next slide. So hindi na to visualize how do they look like. Then we add the jewelries. So both Visayan men and women wore earrings and earplugs, necklaces and collars of beads or gold chain, bracelets, wristlets, anklets, and finger rings, as well as brooches, clasps, and gold sequins on their clothes, besides which men wore arm and leg bands. Taghan kaayo sila klase sa jewelry. Tanang pwede mabutangan, butangan sa kamot, sa wrist, sa diri sa arm, sa tudlo, sa liog. These ornaments were mostly made of gold, and some accentuated with shells, mother of pearl shells, precious stones, or clamps. Next slide. From the day Magellan first saw gold earrings, armbands, and spear decorations in Homonhon, the Spaniards kept reporting, and it's always in the reports or in the kind of archival documents. The Spaniards kept reporting gold jewelry in truly astonishing quantities. They were struck not only by its amount and wide distribution, but by the fact that it appeared to be part of the normal attire of persons otherwise almost naked. So ordinaryo rin kayo ang golden jewelry. Munang na-amaze kaayo sila. Gani si Magellan, iyang giwarn ang iyang mga tao when they were in Cebu. Iyang gipangmadlo nga, huy, ayaw mo pang tanan na lang kabatangan ninyo, inyong ibaylo og gold. Kay mahurot, wala na niya tay ibaligya, wala na tay butang. Kay tunod, ang iyang mga tao enamored kayo, ang iyang mga tao attracted kayo, ang nakakita sila nga nindot kaayo ang golden pieces nga binuhat sa mga Bisaya. Jewelry, Visayan jewelry came in a bewildering variety of forms and styles. Necklaces in the form of strands, chokers, and stars range from dried seeds to precious stones and gold beads. Rings worn around the neck, wrist, or ankles, including gold bands on men's biceps and above the calves of their legs, were called kasikas in general. So naani siyang certain collectively called kasikas kaning mga jewelry sa mga laki. Pero lain-lain nga matang, lain og design, lain og form and style. So makita nimo dinhi daghan ta og mga na-recover naana sila karon sa Ayala Museum, sa Met Museum, and you can go and visit and study the pieces. Kung nindot kaayo, you can always marvel at the level of craftsmanship by ancient Filipino jewelry makers. The most spectacular item, next slide, the most spectacular item in this Visayan inventory was the carnage, a heavy gold chain of such tightly interlocked links, it hardly looked like a chain at all, but rather as solid and sinuous as a golden serpent. Naay nakuha nga mo fit sa description ni Alcina. Naani siya karon kanang the one in the image. Naana siya karon sa Ayala Museum. Next slide, please. And then we have weaponry. Weapons were ordinary part of Visayan male costume or sinina. At least a dagger or spear. If bound with gold or set with gems, this constructed an essential part of a datu's personal jewelry. Daggers, knives, swords, spears, and javelin sheaths and body armor were found everywhere, but the bow and arrow had scattered distribution. So even ang weaponry is part of this idea of endowing the human body, ornamenting the human body with symbolic power. Okay, so I hope with this overview of different ways in which our ancestors would decorate, would do cosmetic refinement to our bodies, that more or less our understanding of pre-colonial notions of beauty is shaped or is clarified. Now, si Alfred Gell na siya nindot kaayong discussion on all of these things, that decoration, implements, and ornamentation of the body. Ayang gitawag ni siya og technology of enchantment. So kining tanan mo interact, all of these elements interact with one another in the body. It's a form of display. And all of these elements of bodily ornamentation enchants the viewer. So it becomes a technology of enchantment. Calls decoration as the technology of enchantment. And for him, decorative patterns applied to artifacts attach people to things. So it creates a symbiotic relationship between the things that we own, that you put in your body, and to the social projects these things entail. Taken into wider understanding, decorative painting, the tattoo, the ornamentation, not only meant or add value to things and spaces, but attracts, enchants, sustains relationship between maker, user, and beholder. So for Gell, decoration which is distinctive binds a thing to its owner in the most intimate fashion. It is less a possession. So kini mga butang nga gi-indaw sa imong gisulob, imong gipalit, para imong isulob, becomes not just as a possession, but as a prosthesis or a bodily organ acquired via manufacture and exchange, rather manufacture and exchange, rather than by biological growth. So this refinement becomes integral component. It is almost a part of your body, a biological growth. Inana ang pagtanaw ni Gell to these implements. Next slide. So, what happened between the initial encounter? So I am putting here some more of Shari's drawings, interpreting iyahang interpretation of the documents. Kini nga mga drawings ni Shari, they were used as guides for the costume of the Mangayaw play during the opening of the 500 years quincentennial celebrations in Mactan in December last year. So these were used to guide the costume of the performers. Sige, naatay bagani, naay mga datu, royal, the nobles, the timawa. So different lain ni nga mga drawings ni Shari. And it gives us that sense again of how our ancestors look like. Sige, next slide. So some more drawings. Okay, next slide, please. So we proceed. Initial encounter. ang atong mga ancestors mauna ang ilang gisulob, inana ang ilang pagtan-aw sa what's beautiful. Niabot ang colonizers sila Magellan. Ug nindot kay initially the early encounter, the first encounter kay decoration of the body became a distinctive demarcation between the foreign and the local, the native. The pre-colonial Filipinos' penchant for a decorated body gave them an indisputable sense of self and pride of culture. Historians noted that before the development of a colonial consciousness, Visayans themselves were unimpressed by the colonizer's simplicity of bearing. I-compare sa gipangsulob sa atong ancestors din, abot ang colonizers, di kay sila impressed. Next slide. Perceived not as maputi. Normally, we call the foreigners maputi. But ang atong ancestors, they don't call them maputi. It's not the color complexion of the skin. Perceived not as maputi or white, but as mapura, which is natural or undyed, that is, untattooed. The intricate bodily decorations become a form of resistance and racial othering. So igtanaw ang colonizers mapura, wa sila'y tattoo. So it is this artistic intervention in the body that creates the segregation of kita as local, sila as colonizers. And furthermore, the colonizers' plain white teeth compared sa katong naay mga golden implements, the colonizers' plain white teeth became the most distinctive feature that the natives easily compared them to the savagery of monkeys, dogs, and pigs. The smiles of persons who expose a mouthful of undecorated teeth were described as baga napkangan huligin, or like a chaw of coconut meat, subscribing to the idea that only wild animals had white undecorated teeth. So, ang rational capacity of human being to create, yung creative capabilities and creative faculties mo'y nakalahi sa savage and sa animals. Niya kung ikaw tao ka, nga wa kay decoration sa imong ngipon, sa imong lawas, wa kay cosmetic refinement, pasabot na nga wa nimo gi-exercise ang imong creative faculty. So muna siya ang difference sa duha ka during the initial encounter. Next slide. So cosmetic refinement, therefore, as a rational and natural human inclination, distinguished the pre-colonial Filipinos from other foreign people, both the early itinerant merchants and then the colonizers. And this cosmetic refinement, this bodily ornamentation, defines the pre-colonial notion of beauty. Next slide. This pre-colonial visuality nga gipakita, gi-display diya sa lawas, needs or belongs to a bigger project or bigger visual program, which is found in rituals and festivities. So the body needs external showmanship, it needs bodily performance, it participates through show, like a show, and perform in rituals and festivities. When women leave their homes, everyday life ni siya. So nakakay lawas, ang imong lawas assumed all the bling bling, the burloloys, dayon naakay mga pangritoki din ha. The women leave their homes to visit others. They walk very slowly. making 1,000 movements with their bodies, with one arm swinging freely, and they consider this very fashionable. So mugawas sa silang balay, hinay kay mulakaw, na yung mga movement sa kamot. So nga naman siya, na yung movement sa kamot, ladies generally wore bracelets in sufficient numbers to attract attention with their jangling. So mutingog ang ihang mga bracelets. So kailangan siya muhinig lakaw, move ang iyang mga kamot. So in day-to-day life, this is from the Boxer Codex and Alcina. So kung mulakaw, hinay kaayo murag na ay murag siya show na ikaw magtan-aw ka, the colonizers, so nagtan-aw nga unsa man ni nga mura man og usa ka salida. External showmanship. So imong i-perform dili lang di ay pwede nga you wear them. You wear them, and while wearing them, you perform in everyday life, and most especially, you participate in ritual offerings and festivities. Not surprisingly, the Visayan vocabulary included terms like kulmat, mukulmat, to strut around, showing off new tattoos. So ikaw, bago kag tattoo, di ra na nimo isulob inside your house, you will go out and show that to people. To kulmat, mo strut around, showing people that you have a new tattoo. And then maghukas, stripped off to the waist for bravado. So bare-chested exposure to the elements was a matter of masculine pride. So again, dira, ang imong tattoo, you display it, you show it, and you do things in the community as a matter of performance. So the body clothed in ornamental luxuriousness are not static entities of display or isolated in itself, but it is always a participant to wider performance and show of symbolic and metaphysical power prescribed, especially in public gatherings, during rituals, ceremonies, and festivities. Makita nimo ang dato ni sud. Maayo kay ni pagka-describe ni Pigfetta ang kaning precolonial showmanship. Pag-abot ni Queen Juana, kay magpabunyag siya, nibalik si Queen Juana with a contingent of women asking for the Santo Niño nga ihatag sa iyaha. Next slide. The colonizers discovered one important indigenous phenomenon, and that is the penchant for funfair, colors, theatricality, and festivity. That is very much pre-colonial. Doreen Fernandez notes how the bodies of pre-colonial Filipinos, through some mimetic action, participate in the many rituals that punctuated the daily life. So birth, na ay ritual para sa pagkatao sa usa ka bata. The assuming of a name, reaching of manhood or womanhood, courtship and marriage, planting, harvesting, illness, battle, victory over enemies, the assumption of office of a new chieftain, and death. So naani mga coinciding rituals. And in these rituals, the body shows off, again, its status in society. So ikaw nga mo participate in these rituals, you wear all of these things to signify your role or your status in the society. Next slide. So Magellan, very strategic. It was very strategic on the part of Magellan to use Catholic rituals and ceremonials to strike a close friendship with Humabon. Pigfetta noted how carefully they executed the celebration of the Mass. Nagtukod man o platform dia sa tunga-tunga sa Cebu, sa syudad sa Cebu, in the open town center, na platform na dito sila nagmisa. How carefully they executed the celebration of the Mass, the rites of baptism of Humabon and his men, the burial of deceased members of the crew, kinani sila gilubong, very solemn, ang ilahang ritual, and the anointing of the sick. So hilig tukay sila. If you read through Pigfetta, nanay mga different rituals lang gibuhat na mag-procession sila around the city, to the houses. And this, I think, is the deliberate strategy or kanang a way of Magellan to actually please this visuality or the predilection of natives for theatricality and performance, festivities. Next slide. Resel Mojares again, in his book on the Santo Niño, contends that it was not solely through political and military sophistication, but through an act of ritual and performance that finally appeased the Cebuano natives under the exiled Rahatupas to come in agreement to the colonial conditions of Legazpi. So pag-abalik ni Legazpi, gikuha na ang Santo Niño ilang nakaplagan, Tupas want to get the Santo Niño from Legazpi. Nagpada siya og 30 ka men to do the negotiation. Og giingnan ni Tupas told them, Legazpi told them to before we proceed with the negotiation, tanawa sa, look at and observe our ritual and our performance and how we pay respect to the Santo Niño. And this rituals and performance actually appeased the local Cebuanos, and then which allowed for the negotiation to happen. So Legazpi were able to stay in Cebu and establish a city. Next slide. Religious rituals and even processions weren't new for the natives. What has captivated them was rather the novel way with which the celebrations were carried out, the Latin language of the Tridentine Mass, the singing of the Gregorian chants, the gilded chalices and the priest's vestments, the calculated movements, the smell of rising incense, all this enchanted the natives. Si Pigfetta, in his writings also, would write about the mag-anito or the religious worship by the babaylans. Makita nimo ang stark difference between how Catholic worship is done and is celebrated against how the babaylans, very spontaneous, very loose, compared to the very calculated Tridentine Mass. Okay, next slide. The decorative and performative predilections of the natives shared the Baroque sensibility of the Spaniards. And this commonality would become an important tool of subjugation, resistance, and control. So murag nag-abot, in that sense, the pre-colonial native indigenous Baroque of our ancestors and the European Baroque which the colonizers brought in with them. Next slide, please. And it's very interesting to note the persistence of this pre-colonial visuality, kaning murag showmanship and external showmanship. Grabe kay siya ka-wired ang pre-colonial Cebuanos or Bisaya. Grabe kay ka-wired ani niya nga idea. The unknown terrain of the archipelago, the strong political rivalries of chiefdoms, and the minimal logistical support from Mexico and Spain forced the early missionaries to circumvent around indigenous culture and navigate through the natives' cultural disposition. Sige, buhat nila, in order to assert their supposed superior ranks, the colonizers had to perform externally the grandeur of their Christian God and the power of the Spanish king through ceremonials and outward ostentations. Next slide. The historian Medina, writing about the early activities of the missionaries, noted the compelling need to celebrate the religious ceremonies with great pomp and spectacle, for among the natives, no sense is so strong as sight. Kailangan imo gid siyang spectacular ang imuhang performance of your rituals, Catholic rituals. Next slide. And thus, the natives were quick to judge as insignificant any Spaniard whom they see abased and rugged. Nagani sila makita nga Spaniards na simple ra jud kaayo. Ilan ang katawhan, ilan ang kadudahan. On the contrary, any Spaniard who would make a show, the natives would immediately call him Kapitan, although he does not deserve to be even a soldier, to be called a Kapitan. But anyone nga ilang makitaan nga kuan kaayo, nga showy kaayo, flashy kaayo, ug mo conduct in public in a very ostentatious manner, they call him Kapitan. Pero ang katuganing mga magpaupoy-upoy nga mga colonizer, ilang katawan. Next slide. One would not blame the natives for such judgments of inferiority among less flashy colonizers, for the ostentations that they were accustomed with was also suddenly confronted by the theologically obligated vow of poverty. The muted colors of sackcloth that the missionaries used for daily affairs fared unimpressively compared to the intricate woven clothing and precious accessories that the natives lavishly wore and kept. So, ang mga Franciscan, Agustinian, nga nagsulubog itom, nagsulubog brown, layo kaayo sa vibrant colors of pre-colonial vestures, clothing. So, murag-murag na matinga sila, ilang makompare. Next slide. At one instance, a missionary was going to visit the chapel under his parish and intended to commence with the greatest poverty. Franciscan siguro ni siya nga missionary. So that he took neither bed nor refreshment. The servant who accompanied him as a cook, so na siya kauban nga cook, understood that the minister was doing it so because he must be some banyaga in his own country that is low and base by birth, banyaga. Public. He must be poor in Spain or in Mexico. Maunang he can't afford to travel with all the amenities, with all the support, with all the comforts. The same is true for missionaries who were used at going barefoot as expressions of penitence and sacrifice. So di kasabot primero ana ang mga natives, ngano inana ang ilang mga pari compared to the babaylans nga very kanang intricate ang ilahang bearing. Next slide. Thus, under these circumstances, a notable minister of the Visayas, Father Bernabe de Villalobos, according to Alcina, strongly advised any minister working in the islands that if he wished to ascend to any dignity, although he would endeavor to be as humble as possible before God, he would show the utmost grandeur outwardly, so that the natives might recognize the majesty of the dignity by the exterior. So murag na co-opted ang missionaries to deal with the pre-colonial visuality, the pre-colonial concept of decoration. Bisan og mga they want to live their theological virtues of say poverty. So inana nga tension, very very interesting to note, that happened early on in the colonization period, early colonization period. Next slide. Participating in the indigenous performance of social status easily legitimized the colonizer's superior place in the new social order. acceptable to the natives' performative predisposition. Thus, despite their logistical shortcomings, the Spaniards were able to assert and maintain colonial power over the people who felt enamored and enchanted by novel European externality and the Catholic faith's pompous rituals. And while the body in pre-colonial times was the medium and site of power, with Catholic doctrine would become a locus of contestations and transformations. It would become a means of demarcation between the converted and the savage, between the saved and the damned. So ang pre-colonial body nga would give you during the onset of colonization, it marks the demarcation nga kini siya Catholic, kini siya converted na, kana sila mga savage pagans pa na sila, kay naagi hapon sila tattoo, kinaagi hapon sila gold in their teeth, between the saved and the damned. Kining naa nagtangtang aning mga pre-colonial this kanang ornamentation, nagtangtang silang lawas, mao ni sila'y maluwas. Ang kanang nagsulob gihapon damned. Next slide. Again, Russell Muhares calls this reformation of the pre-colonial body, the reform of pre-colonial body, as the catechisms of the body, wherein the bodies were reformed in the ways they appeared and moved and converted so that what was within, ang iyang humor, ang iyang mind, iyang soul, constituted these bodies as good colonials and good Christians, underwritten by the views that indigenous culture was lacking in order, decorum, and symmetry. So good na og shift ang tension between decoration, the pre-colonial decorative humanism. The fabrication of a new body systems was effectively done through the Christian code of conduct that the missionaries printed and propagated through such media as sermons, catechetical instructions, novenas, exemplas, lives of saints, and through art. Next slide. The pre-colonial bodily decoration thereafter became insignia not anymore of the brave and the elect, but of a savage alterity unworthy of the new social order. From being a proud entity, the body is shamed, defeated, and paraded in a display of bloody penance and colonial surrender. Next slide, please. So the body is shamed, defeated, and paraded in a display of bloody penance and colonial surrender. So na-transform yun the way Filipinos look at the body. Next slide. We are about to end that. While transforming the native body into colonial subjects, the Catholic Church enshrined a new bodily entity, the embodiment of the divine, of the Word made flesh. Intertwined with the mystery of incarnation is the doctrine of the real presence of Christ that teaches Jesus is substantially present in the Eucharistic host. Gitawag na Corpus Christi or the body of Christ. Next slide. This new bodily entity and bodily understanding, the Corpus Christi then would become the new impetus of the decorative spirits of the converted natives. The catechized body from the ornamented, decorated body, the catechized body paved the way to the ostentatious glorification of the body of Christ. The new visual order signals a new period of art production, mostly centered around the church. So from there, mausab na ang view of art. Mausab na ang aesthetic experience. And that is in the context of the Christian faith. So I think I'll end there because it is another set of discussion ang kanina pong develop sa ecclesiastical art during the early years and the years of colonialism under Spain. So yeah, I think I'll end there. And I hope you were able to get something and that you get a picture of the aesthetic life of our pre-colonial ancestors. So our title, Bulawanong Tahom. Tahom is a very beautiful word that captures the idea of grace and elegance, the idea of beauty, charm, allurement, gentility, gracefulness of face. I'm reading from the dictionary of Ma'am Erlinda Alburo, Dictionary of Visayan Arts. So she translated from the archival dictionaries also. Tahom means that grace, elegance, charm, allurement. And Bulawanong, the idea of gold, how important gold was for our pre-colonial ancestors, and how this metal, precious metal, catches and reflects the light onto the face, onto whatever it bounces on. So the golden radiance, Bulawanong Tahom. And that, I think, is a beautiful picture of to summarize how our ancestors think aesthetically, how they experience beauty, how they think about beauty. So yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone.
Right. Daghan kaayong salamat, Jay, for that very fascinating lecture, no? And we saw the breadth of how do you call this? How the Cebuanos treated their bodies, no, during the pre-colonial period, and then it segued into the change of perspective brought on by the Spaniards' faith, and now the shift from body to spirit na lahi na sad ang focus. And with that, Jay, we are now ready to get entertain questions for you. We have probably three. Let's see if we can accommodate 3 to 5 questions. First and foremost, before we do that, Jay, I just like to ask something. This is from me na. You mentioned, Manggod, nga everything is expressed in the body, and outside of the body, that's impermanent, no? In a sense, you gave an example of architecture nila. Do they see the body? Is this because they saw the body as permanent, and the rest outside of the body is impermanent? Or how did they see the body in relation to what's outside of it?
There is a really interesting discussion by Alcina, complete chapter on the religion of pre-colonial Visayans. And then Alcina pointed there how integral ang body mo siya ay fulcrum ba. It is permanent in a sense that it is in the body that the outside world and the interiority, spirit that converges. It becomes more of a dwelling. And I'm gonna sila murag levels of spirit world and then underworld, and in the body is of the present, and the body really is treated with so much dignity because it expresses both the interiority na naikuan pod kanang loob labas nga concept of Filipino understanding of so the body is that entity that navigates through loob and labas. So
it's like the medium, no? It's the middle ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay. Okay, ragate, oy, char. Okay, I just wanted that clarified, Jay, because that also helps actually in the way we see things nga nung nausab ni siyang pagtanaw in the pre-colonial, nausab yun na siya karon, no? Because of after centuries of being colonized by Westerners and the imposition also of Western thought into our culture. Okay, let's have the first question. Ganiha gi-flash to. Just to set up aside and set the tone tong ako ang pangutana kay na intriga gyud ko. Andrew V. John Rebushas asks, thank you for your question. Where can we visit to see evidence of these practices? Are there archaeological evidence of this, or are the evidence from accounts only?
Yeah,
I think na-answer na. Sige, yes.
Nindot kina siya nga pangutana because there is really a need for more museums in the regions outside Manila. Lisod kaayo for us Cebuanos, Bisaya to understand, to appreciate these things when in fact all of the evidences that we're talking about, all of the things that we're talking about this afternoon are all in Manila. It's in National Museum, it's in Met Museum, it's in the Ayala Museum, Metropolitan Museum in Manila. So maglisod kaayta og access. So walay democratic access to these artifacts for people not living in Manila, in the capital. So what we have are snippets, mga nakautan lang sa atong own local institutions. Diri San Carlos na ata ang kaning Bulhuon nga parish na ay puy gamay na ay mga golden kanang death masks na nahukay. So na ay mga skulls nga nahukay, nga na ay mga golden pegs ang ilang teeth.
Fillings, yeah.
Yes, ate.
Mo help ba siya, Jay, nga mag-open man kuno ang NM dinhi?
I hope that the curation of these museums would also put highlight into our pre-colonial identity, because it's very important. You know that the writings of Pigfetta, it's really about the Bisaya. It started like it's happened. The narratives, the stories of Pigfetta, and even Alcina, kanang mga sources nato, primary sources of pre-colonial culture, happened in the Visayas, happened in Cebu, for example. Then kita sa Cebu, it's something that we should, I think, our cultural leaders should also think about. It is very institutional in the sense that it needs fund to acquire. There are many potteries, for example, pre-colonial gold in Cebu. I know of private collections, and it just need reliable institution who can partner with these private collections and who can bring this out to more publics.
In other words, we need more exhibits or even museums, no? But if we can't, we can just be happy. I think it's a start if we have exhibits more of pre-colonial culture, Cebuano culture and heritage. Okay, let's have another question. Thank you, Andre V, for your question. Here's from Virginia Laksamana. Why did our ancestors conceptualize their tattoos from snakes and animals? Why did they get inspiration, I think, from kaning mga animals or mga reptiles or mga for their tattoos?
I think it is the idea that these animals are very kanang sa English ang
poisonous, venomous.
They have the capacity to arrest. Snakes alone, they have the capacity to arrest, to devour you alive. And what better kanang comparison
symbol
that whatever patterns you want to assume or put and decorate your body would be that of a very powerful animal. And even snakes also, they are not just that brutally kanang brutally kuan, but they are also symbols of spirits na she placed in the order of kidaghan man kay mga anitos ang ato ang pre-colonial ancestors. These animals assume also a certain kind of mysticism and mystical power, that they are not just kanang poisonous or venomous animals, but that they are kanang belong to a spiritual world. Gani kana kunong kanang patterns, according to one of the oral narratives, is that kanang musiga na siya when you travel. It will guide you. It will light your way, your
when you die. Yeah.
When you die. The more tattoos i-decorate, the more siga, bright imong future nga maabot yung ka sa promised land. Di ka masakal.
if I remember correctly, ang tattoos, Jay, is also a way of murag identification nimo ba, so when you die kuno mailhan ka sa imong mga ancestors dito kay kibaw sila nga naa kaani nga mga tattoos. And you are right, I think no naa naman tay concept nga what we put in our bodies, whether internally or externally, we become them. So mo tingali nga na kanang mga snakes or powerful or dangerous things, we become that also, or our warriors wanted to imbibe that, especially in the battleground. Tingali no muna.
Oo nga, kanang ang mga pintados nagbarog sa ilang mga barko padung landing, murag mahadlok yung ka.
Kahadlukan. Tenod.
Kuan kanang Legazpi really conquered Manila.
Yes.
From matanda, like he brought in a battalion of pintado soldier, warriors. Then di pa barog nila niya dinha nga murag sa sight alone of these people, of these guys, mahibawan biya nimo kay kung puros gyud na puno gyud kaayo tattoo kada mga fierce warriors gyud gipada nila.
Hasta kung apil ng naong, Jay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's have the third question. Oh, from Sir Nimor. Hi, Sir Nimor. Thank you for watching our webinar. What happened to the pre-colonial body aesthetics with the introduction of Christianity and Hispanic culture? What happened to our aesthetics? It was thrown out the window.
Actually, even until now, the persistence of the pre-colonial rituality up until the present is there. It assumes different articulations and expressions. Pero kanang atong pagkamapistahon, kanang ato ang pagka-flashy, we want really bright colors sa sinulog nato nga mga sayaw, costume, kanang maghikay gyud sa pista nga mangutang na lang.
That's a remnant, no?
No, kana gikan na siya kalabutan sa kaning pre-colonial disposition. Ang nahitabo lang yun nga nawa na siya ang bodily decoration kay maulag ito. Kung magsulog ka ana, ikaw man maoy kanang lahi, di ka civilized. Inculcate naman ang western culture, ang western mode of living. Niya kung ikaw meaning to say taga-bukid ni siya or kanang wa na convert, makasasala, and the worst good, if you are a Catholic, you are damned. Those people na magsulog pa ana, they were threatened that their soul will be damned and not, you can't enter heaven, in other words. So ikaw nga you want to be part of the reduction. Remember, gisud na sila into the poblations, the towns. So kung ikaw musud ka sa town, magpuyo ka, magtukod kag balay sa town, nagsulob kag tattoo, di jud ka pwede ana. Pagawason jud ka sa pari sa town. So, and also through the galleon trade, ang kaning gold na ilisda niya siya sa Mexican silver. Kay man ang Mexican silver.
Mas unsa, Jay? I'm sorry, Mexican silver is what?
Plentiful.
Okay.
So muna, ang gibuhat nila sa gold, actually, basa ka sa daghang documents, ang gibuhat nila sa gold, gi-collect na sa mga pari. Gi-collect na sa mga pari, mura ba, o kana bitang mo surrender na mga NPA nga mo, adto sila, magdas sila ang pusil, sa inana. Kung ikaw magpa-convert ka, magdakas imong gold as offering. Father, gold, Father. Mas daghang gold, mas paborito ka sa pari. Mas daghan og gems, paborito ka sa pari. Unsa may gibuhat, ilan yung gipang tunaw tanan para himong kalis, himong corona sa birhen, himong race sa kanang Santo Cristo.
I find it very interesting, Jay, no nga it was easy. Christianity, the faith, was actually the way for us to easily accept or welcome not only the faith but also the Spaniards, no? But at the same time, and which I find ironic, is that it's also the same faith that according to the words of Resil Mojares, reformed the body. No, So I find it very interesting. The pomp ing ana munay nakakatch nato and then gibasa na sa may kay mamasa ang mga Spaniards. Unya mo ilang gigamit pagdani nato sa ilahang kanang pagtuo o kanang sa kanila, no? And then eventually in turn rasad na against us, and ironic. I just find it
It's really
ironic.
ironic.
Yeah.
Kana the very means by which they befriended us
Was also the means that they betrayed us. Kaya sorry. Kanang nalingaw sa gudjay kaniingon ka nga no karon na abitaw na pagka a little bit kanang murag ostracize ta og tao nga mo yung tag hala kadaghan yung jewelry na daghan na mura siya gihepa. But actually that's a pre-colonial nga ko ano nga murag nabilin sa pre-colonial nga culture. So
ila nato tinga gikag Saudi kanang mga
tinuod.
Kuanon dahil kanang idea of burloloy, kanang bling bling, very very Bisaya man kay na siya, kanang maburloloy kaayo nya kanang I think labot na siya sa the persistence of that pre-colonial kuan.
Yes. Anyway, I'm sorry because we are at a loss for time already. We can only accommodate 3 questions. I know that actually, Jay, it's a very interesting chat that I saw in the comment section of our FB page. And I know there were a lot of questions that I wanted to ask you. Maybe we can send the questions to Professor Jore and he could answer some of them. And then we can just still again post. I don't know if that is possible, but we will try to have Professor Jore answer all of the questions that we have. Because we also didn't have time, but actually we also prepared trivia questions for our audience. We have 5 trivia questions, and whoever answers them first gets a prize. So, but because we couldn't do that now, we are still going to be posting the trivia questions, and these were prepared, by the way, by Professor Jore, ha? So, kinahanglan tubagon ni ninyo kay naminaw bagyud mo sa iyahang lecture. And the first who will be able to type the correct answer will get a prize. And with this, we'd like to thank Professor Jore, who really, I know he's so busy these days, but really took time to prepare his presentation. I know how it was, and he has also other coming talks, and mag-prepare na sa din siya, nagsapaw-sapaw na Jay. But Jay, and then mo participate pag yun isa sa ato ang mga meetings sa gabi sa kabilin. And so I would like to really thank profusely si Professor Jore no sa pagdawat sa imbitasyon to give a webinar about pre-colonial aesthetics, Cebuano aesthetics. Daghan kaayong salamat, Jay, and we will be giving you your e-certificate, of course. Here's our certificate of appreciation. Mo naman the usual, but it's signed by Rafi's very own former president and COO, Ms. Dominica Bichua. We will be sending the copy of the certificate to you, Jay. Thank you, Gyud Kaayo. And we would like to thank UP Cebu for hosting this webinar, this Gabi Sa Kabilin online activity. I'd like to also thank Dean Pami Tudtud for really taking the time to be there live to give her opening remarks. Daghan kaayong salamat, Jay. I hope di ka sumulan sa among imbitasyon and pag-participate sa Gabi Sa Kabilin. Unya, magpasalamat. Yes, Jay. Sige, Jay. I'll give you the... Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Mora gyud ako sulti.
Anyway, we'd like to also thank all of the GSK partners. Thank you very much. Definitely, we're cooking something up for the next year. I hope you will watch out to what GSK is preparing for you for 2021, the big year. And we'd like to also thank the GSK organizing committee from Rafi, particularly Joey Martel, Arlene, Sig, and Mac. I'd like to also thank Faye and the people at the Rafi BDG for helping us promote the Gabi Sa Kabilin online activity. We'd like to remind everyone to please accomplish the evaluation form. We will send a link in the comment section. and then so that you can get your e-certificate. I think it also requires them to fill out the registration form, no? So we're still going to provide the link for the registration. We're not closing it yet. And we'd like to remind everyone that we have actually much awaited sa nisha, the DASEF Kids Contest. No, and very interesting ang contest yun. Interesting kay tong ning agi dingdot kay ang mga nangapil og mga nakadaog, no. Unya, we're looking forward to this one because this contest is a contest on costumes, no, Precolonial Cebuano costume contest. So I hope our parents were listening here, especially for those who want their kids to participate in the contest. Kay kinahanglan ta mo follow sa mga pre-colonial standards lang, of course, but we have to be very decent, no? Kay naman jay mga certain things na di na to ang ipabuhat sa atong mga ipasulob sa ato ang mga kids, but we have to follow also certain standards. So kompleto na from costume to accessories to the hair para daog sila sa ato ang contest. And please follow us on GSK FB page. We are down actually to our last two nga GSK online activities for December 18. It's a very interesting, the last two, by the way, will close our GSK online for 2020. And these two topics is worthy or kanang, let's say, very appropriate closing to the online activities nato themed the journey. Kay on December 18, we will have a webinar, two speakers, very important speakers, si Dr. Danilo Herona and Dr. Jose Eliazar Bersales. The topic is Lapu-Lapu, the man and the myth. They're going to be debunking the myths, the misinformation about Lapu-Lapu. So this will set the record straight. And on December 29, we will close out with the video of Casa Gorordo Museum on 49 questions with Magellan and friends. And with that, we'd like to thank everyone who stuck it out in our and followed us and who are here in our webinar. Thank you very much. And I hope you were able to get a lot of things and make you proud about who we are as Cebuanos and give you an idea or really, how do you call this? Kanang really established and help you feel good about who we are because this is who we are, no? This is our identity. And with that, we'd like to thank everyone and say goodbye. We'll see you in the next GSK Online.
Again, thank you so much for your valuable time and for participating in our 8th online activity. We hope to see you again next month for another engaging activity to appreciate and experience Cebu's culture and heritage. Only here at Gabi sa Kabilin 2020 online activities. Have a good day.